a crew of tired sailors. Once found an island in an empty sea. Green grass, black sand, solid ground. They walked on it. They built a fire on it. They thanked God for it. And then the island opened one enormous eye. This story does not come from one country. It comes from the sea itself. You find it all across the medieval world. You find it in the great Irish legend of the voyage of St. Brendan, a monk who sailed the Atlantic in a hide boat more than 1,000 years ago. You find it in the bestiaries, the strange illustrated books of beasts that medieval Europe loved so much. You find a version in the Arabian tales of Sinbad the Sailor. You find it among the Norse and in the old stories of the far north, wherever there were sailors, wherever there were people who pushed small wooden boats out onto an enormous, unknowable ocean. There was some version of this same story, and that should tell you something. When a story appears everywhere at once, in cultures that never spoke to each other, it is almost never a story about the thing it appears to be about. This is not really a story about a whale. It is a story that frightened sailors told each other about the most dangerous thing in their whole hard lives, more dangerous than storms, more dangerous than rocks. It is a story about the thing you trust most the thing you stop checking the ground. You decide at last is safe. There was a ship and a crew in the oldest tellings. They are monks, the followers of St. Brendan, sailing west across the Atlantic in search of a holy island. But you may picture them however you like. Sailors, travellers, people a long way from home, and they had been at sea for a very long time. You have to understand what a long sea voyage meant. In those days, it meant weeks, sometimes months, with nothing beneath you but moving water. It meant the ground itself, the solid earth, the simple feeling of standing on something that did not pitch and roll. It meant that feeling became a thing you ached for, like water, like sleep, like the face of someone you loved. The crew in this story had been at sea so long that they had begun quietly to despair. Their food was low, their water was low, and the sea in every direction to the flat, hard line of the horizon was empty. And then, one grey morning far ahead, one of the crew saw land. It was an island, a low one, long and dark and gently rounded. It did not rise in cliffs or peaks, but lay close to the water like the back of some great resting thing. The crew, of course, did not think of it that way. The crew thought land. As the ship drew closer, they could see more of it. There was sand, dark sand, almost black. There was grass, coarse green grass, growing in tufts and patches. There were even, here and there, a few low trees and pale boulders, and what looked like the mouths of small caves. It looked, in every way, like an island. And here is the thing I need you to sit with. It did not look like an island by accident. It looked like an island because it had been in the sea for a very, very long time, long enough for sand to gather in the ridges of its back, long enough for seeds to blow onto it and catch and grow, long enough for grass, for trees, for the slow, patient work of years and weather to dress it completely in the costume of solid ground. The disguise was not a trick. The creature was not trying to fool anyone. The disguise was simply what happens to anything that holds still. Long enough, it gathers a crust. It grows a surface. And the surface looks exactly like something you can safely stand on. The ship came in close, and the crew dropped anchor, and then they did what any of us would have done after weeks on the heaving sea, starving, parched, half mad for the feel of solid earth. The crew climbed down onto the island, and it held them. That is the moment the storytellers say that mattered most. The crew stepped down, braced for who knows what, and the ground took their weight. It was firm. It did not shift. The grass was real grass under their hands. The sand was real sand between their toes. One sailor knelt down and pressed his forehead to the earth and wept with relief. And once the ground had held them for 1 minute, for 5, for an hour, the crew stopped testing it. This is how trust works. You are careful with a thing exactly once. You test it at the beginning, and if it holds, that first time you file it away in your mind under the heading *solid*, and you never, ever check it again. So the crew spread out across their island. They explored the little caves. They walked among the trees. They unloaded provisions from the ship. They set up a proper camp, and then, because they were cold and because they had not eaten a hot meal in longer than they could remember, the crew gathered driftwood and dry grass, and they stacked in the middle of the island, and they struck a spark, and they lit fire. The fire caught and grew and burned. The crew sat around it in the grey afternoon, and they cooked and they ate, and for the first time in weeks they laughed. The despair of the empty sea lifted off them. They had found land. They had found rest. They had found under their feet something solid in a world that had given them for so long nothing but motion. And then the island grew warm. At first, the crew thought it was the fire. Of course, they did. You light a fire. The ground beneath it warms. That is only natural. But it was not only natural, because the warmth did not stay. Under the fire, it spread. The crew began to feel it through the soles of their feet. Far from the flames, a low, living heat rising up out of the grass and the black sand from one end of the island to the other, and then the ground. Moved. Not a tremor, not a shudder. It was worse than that. It was slow. The whole island gave a single, deep, deliberate flinch, the exact motion of a living body that has felt in its sleep something hot and small burning on its skin, deep beneath the camp. The sailors heard it, a sound no island has ever made, a long, rising, rumbling groan. The island they had landed on and trusted and built their fire upon was waking up. The crew understood all at once, together. The island was not an island. The grass, the sand, the trees, the little caves they had so cheerfully explored, all of it was the back and the hide of an immense, sleeping sea beast. In the legend of St. Brendan, it is a great fish. Later tellers gave it a name, the *aspidochelone, the ass-pea turtle, a creature the size of a coastline. The little caves the sailors had walked into were the spaces between its vast plated scales. The dark sand was the silt of years settled on its skin, and the creature had lain so still for so long in the deep cold sea that it had simply become the most convincing solid ground those sailors had ever set foot on. And now there was a fire burning on its back. The beast began to dive, not quickly. That is the horror the storytellers always reach for. It did not happen fast. The island simply began with terrible, unhurried calm to sink. The grassy edges slid under the grey water. The black sand went dark and wet, and then vanished. The little trees tilted and were swallowed, and the crew screaming now, scrambling, slipping on hide. That was no longer pretending to be earth. Ran for the one thing in all that sea that was still actually what it appeared to be. They ran for the ship. Some of the crew reached the ship in the kinder tellings. Most of them do in the harder tellings. Not all, but let us say that the ones who had stayed nearest the shore, the ones who had never quite let themselves settle, never quite unpacked, never quite stopped glancing back at the boat, those were the ones who made it. They cut the anchor rope. They had no time to haul it. They threw themselves at the oars, and they pulled with the last of their strength away from the sinking, heaving, groaning shape that had been an hour before their salvation. And from the deck of the ship, safe, gasping, soaked, the surviving sailors turned and watched their island go under. They watched the last patch of grass slide beneath the waves. They watched the dark water close over the place where their cooking fire had been. And then, far out, beyond where the island had been, they saw something rise, a vast ridged back, briefly the slow curve of an enormous tail, and for one moment turned toward them across the grey water, a single dark, ancient eye. And then the sea was empty again, flat, grey, as if there had never been an island there at all, as, of course, there never had. Now, here is why. This story was told when an old sailor told this tale to a young one around a fire in a stone hut the night before the boy's first voyage. The old sailor was not really warning him about whales. A young sailor does not need warning about whales. he is already afraid. Of the obvious things, he is afraid. Of the storm, he is afraid. Of the rocks he can see, he is afraid. Of the dark water, and the long crossing, and the things that announce themselves as dangerous number. The old sailor was warning him about something far harder to be afraid of. He was warning him about the ground that holds, because the danger in this story was never hidden. The danger was the part that looked the asterisk safest. Asterisk. It was the green grass. It was the firm sand. It was the very thing the exhausted crew had been longing for and praying for and weeping with relief to finally find. The trap was not disguised as a threat. The trap was disguised as asterisk rest, asterisk as home, as solid ground, and the crew was not destroyed because they landed on the beast. Landing on it was understandable. Anyone would have. They were destroyed because once it held them, once it passed that very first test, they stopped checking. They unpacked. They settled. They built a fire and made themselves asterisk at home asterisk on a surface they had decided forever was safe. So the old sailor would lean in toward the young one, and he would tell him the one rule, that the story exists to teach. Asterisk, when you land somewhere, asterisk, the old sailor would say asterisk, and it holds you good. Be glad, rest. But, boy, asterisk, asterisk, do not stop checking the ground. Just because it held you once, asterisk, asterisk, keep one eye always on whether the earth beneath you is still earth. Keep a watch on it. Notice if it grows warm. Notice if it flinches. And, boy, asterisk, and here the old sailor's voice would drop, asterisk, whatever you do. Keep the ship in sight. Never let yourself get so comfortable, so settled, so far from the boat, that if the ground ever did begin to move, you could not get back to something that is actually what it claims to be, asterisk, because here is the hard truth of this story. You are standing on islands right now. All of us are. We have to. You cannot live on the open sea. You have to stand on asterisk, something asterisk. A relationship, a belief, a job, a person, a story you tell yourself about who you are. Some ground you have decided to trust enough to build a fire on and unpack and live. And most of that ground is real. Most islands are islands. This story is not telling you to trust nothing. It is telling you something much more precise. It is telling you that the ground most likely to drown you is not the ground you are watching. It is the ground you have stopped watching. The thing you tested once, long ago, and filed away forever under asterisk solid asterisk the surface. You trust so completely that you would never think to feel it some quiet afternoon for the first faint beginnings of warmth. There is one last thing to know about this story. We tell it usually as an adventure, a monster story. Sailors, a whale, a narrow escape, a good tale for a dark night. But the sailors who first told it were not telling. An adventure, they were the most practical people who have ever lived. They were people whose lives depended every single day on judging correctly what could be trusted and what could not. And this was the warning they thought most worth passing on. Not. Asterisk, beware of monsters. Asterisk, monsters are easy. You can see a monster. You were already afraid of a monster. The warning was, asterisk, beware of the ground that has held you for a long time. Asterisk, beware of the surface you have completely stopped checking. Go back, sometimes to the things you trust most, the oldest friendship, the deepest belief, the relationship you would have sworn was bedrock, the story about yourself you have not questioned in 20 years and put your bare hand flat against it and just feel. Is it still cold? Is it still, asterisk, still, asterisk, because the crew in the story was not foolish for landing on the beast. You would have landed too. They were only undone by one thing, by deciding, after the ground held them, asterisk, once, asterisk, that they would never need to check it again. So rest, friend, build your fire, make your home on the islands you have found, but keep the ship in sight, and every now and then kneel down and feel the ground. If you want more parables from the world's storytellers, sacred and secular, from every continent, subscribe. Every one of them is a hand pressed flat to the ground, checking gently whether it is still solid